why are your recipes whole food, plant-based, and oil-free, or primarily oil-free?
The big reason that they're whole food plant-based is my philosophy on oil has shifted over the years. The main argument for going oil-free when I wrote my first cookbook seemed to be eating an oil-free lifestyle and potentially diabetes is really beneficial because...
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, we have a very special guest for you. We have Carleigh from PlantYou. We actually just met up in New York to eat some delicious vegan food on July 4th when Ivy and I were away on our digital detox. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about her transition to plant-based eating, how she dealt with her husband learning to eat more plant-based, to writing her first cookbook, PlantYou, and now working on her, basically having launched her latest cookbook, Scrappy Cooking. So I want you to stay tuned until the end because I'm going to be buying 10 of her cookbook them away online. So 5 of them, I will do a giveaway for them on my Instagram page. You can find the link for that in the description below. And the other 5, I will do a giveaway for our Fit Vegan coaching members. So if you're one of our clients, head over to our Fit Vegan app. It'll be in our group chat. I'll post all the details on there. If you're not one of our clients, head over to my Instagram because you have the opportunity to win one of the 5 copies. So Carleigh, with a social community of millions of followers, a New York Times best-selling author of PlantYou, she's also a self-taught plant-based cook and content creator. She's famous for her simple take on low-waste and vegan recipes. She's been featured in the Rachel Ray Show, Good Morning America, Business Insider, and KTLA News for her scrappy cooking and viral vegan creations. Along with producing weekly cooking videos and recipes, Carleigh also runs a digital meal planner, all with the goal of helping people eat more plants in an easy and approachable way. And she's also based out of Canada. Ultimately, she's just a few hours of where I grew up. So hope you guys enjoy the episode. Be sure to, rate the podcast if you enjoyed this episode. Like it if you're on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. If not, make sure to leave a 5-star review if you're listening on Spotify or the Apple Podcast. Enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime Sigouin, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what the show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. All right, Carleigh, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good. It's great to reconnect after, 4 days when we met up in New York?
Yes. For anybody listening, we met up at Planta in New York for lunch, and it's just an amazing restaurant, and it's always so nice to chat with like-minded individuals, and I just love you and your wife. I'm obsessed with Ivy. She's amazing. And so are you. So I'm so pumped to be on today.
Yeah, she's pretty great. She's like the 90% of our relationship. I'm the 10% as supportive for her. She has great energy. No, it was great to connect with you and your cousin. You were down in New York. You were shooting something, right, for TV?
Yeah. I went on Good Morning America for July 4th, which was an absolute blast. So it was a really quick trip. We were just there for 2 nights. And then you were there a bit longer, right?
Yeah, for a whole week, did a little digital detox while I was up there or down there.
Amazing. And how do you feel after your digital detox? Are you back online?
I haven't downloaded Instagram yet on my phone. Like yesterday, I went back to post a few stories, and I was like, I hate this. So I just redeleted it from my computers and everything. But I'm happy to be recording podcasts. I'm happy to be getting kickstarted with you ultimately.
Yeah, it's good discipline. I don't think I have ever, since I started blogging, vlogging, whatever you want to call it, actually deleted Instagram off my phone. And I should.
It's scary.
It is scary. It feels like at this point in my career, it feels like my phone is like a third arm, It's just such a deep part of my life and everything I do, but probably want to kind of cut that off at some point.
Yeah. Well, the first time you do it, it's really scary. You're like, am I going to miss out on something? Like, what if I have to answer messages or DMs or whatever it may be? But no, that's why I reached out to you by text. When you mentioned you were in New York, I was like, I'm going to try to DM her, but there's no way she sees it. You have way too many messages. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
The DMs on Instagram get crazy. And as you know, as someone who has like a large following on Instagram, there's all these like different inboxes. So I always tell people it's
Yeah.
not that I'm intentionally not trying to answer. Oftentimes it will go into like a hidden inbox and then there's another hidden inbox. So it's like a super weird format on there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you including me as a part of your following count because I don't have as many as you do. And I can't even imagine the amount of messages you get and how, that was more than a full time job, I'm sure, if you like stay there and sit down and trying to answer everyone.
Yeah, I used to pride myself on communicating so much with my audience. And as you kind of grow, it's unfortunate, but you just get to a point where it's a bandwidth issue and you cannot reply to everyone. And I mean, I guess in theory, I could hire somebody to answer every single person that messages me, but I don't know that that's what I would want to do anyways, because they're probably hoping that they can directly connect with me on my own page, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes crazy and it makes me sad to think that people are messaging me and I never see it.
Yeah. Well, hey, I get it. So I love to talk as to like what brought you to be in this position here. So obviously, we've met a few times. We met in Seattle, I think, for the first time at Planted Expo. Um, yeah, I'm curious, like, what started it all? What made you go into the plant-based movement? Because I know you didn't grow up that way. We have a similar brought up because you're up on a
Yeah, we're both
farm.
Canadian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Canadian too.
So I grew up on a hobby farm in a small town called Innisfil, Ontario. By hobby farm, I don't mean that my parents had like pigs that they were eating or anything like that, but they had about 5 acres with horses, chickens, lots of animals always coming through. My parents, huge animal lovers. And we just would eat meat at just about every meal. And when I was 11 years old, my dad was diagnosed with stage 2 colon cancer. And this was horrifying, as you can imagine, to a
Yeah,
kid. My dad went through really invasive surgery, chemotherapy, the whole bit. He's still here and cancer free. So that is
good.
great news. However, at the time, it's so interesting because no one ever mentioned diet as a potential contributor to the colon cancer, which we now know has a strong link to what you're eating. And I think you'll remember at the time the Canada Food Guide was like that pie chart and it had a
Yeah.
huge section for meat and a huge section for dairy. So my parents really thought by having these products in breakfast, lunch, and dinner that that's what they were feeding us as part of a healthy diet. And it wasn't until fast forward 2015, the World Health Organization shared that red and processed meat were now classed as group 2 and group 1 carcinogens. And I remember my dad in particular being very shocked by this news because it felt like you had been misled post cancer diagnosis just to continue eating the very thing that could have contributed to this really shocking disease. So, as a family, we sort of transitioned to a plant based lifestyle. I, at the time, was actually living in Northern Ontario working as a radio host. And I had a tiny, tiny, maybe 500 square foot bachelor apartment. And I didn't know how to cook. I was like picking up, I remember I would go into the grocery store and pick up these pre made chicken meals. And I was
Yeah.
very into like working out at the time. So I thought, chicken, broccoli, and rice was what I needed to be eating.
Bodybuilder diet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bodybuilder diet. I mean, I did not look like a bodybuilder, but I was I was trying to eat what I thought was healthy.
Yeah.
And I sort of overnight had to teach myself how to start eating more plants. And the big thing that almost immediately happened is I was really constipated as a kid to the point where I was put on laxatives. And
Okay.
everybody just said, "Oh, you have a slow digestive system." That immediately, when I went plant based, resolved. And it makes so much sense now because 90% of us are not meeting our daily recommended intake of fiber. Where does fiber
Yeah.
come from? Plants. It's devoid in meat and dairy, which was the mainstay of my diet up until then. So I felt great. I didn't know how to cook, but I was making my way and I decided to document it. And that's kind of how Plant You was born.
And so how many years? That was in 2015?
Probably, you know what? I always say 2015, but I think it was probably when I started transitioning. I always say transitioning because it probably took me about a year and a half. It
Yeah.
was closer to 2014, 2013 when I was working up north, and that's when it all started. And I remember the first thing to go was like red meat. And
Yeah.
then the big part for me that kind of held me back from jumping into being fully vegan was the social aspect. So, like, I would go to
Yeah.
Thanksgiving and have turkey and then be back to like vegan 90% of the time. But that took me, I would say, a year or two. So, it wasn't until 2015, 2016 that I fully like committed when that news came out from the World Health Organization. So, yeah, it was a journey. I always say it's a journey, not a race. Although I think you told me that you went vegan almost overnight.
Yeah, I did. I went vegan overnight, but not at all for health reasons. I just need to get skinny for modeling. That's why I went vegan. That was
And
it
did
was
it
purely
work?
super. I lie. I lost 80 pounds in a year for my
Oh
first
my
year, and
goodness.
yeah, and I did a model in Italy. I was able to kind of do that for work. So yeah, it was a little bit different journey. Mine was purely superficial. So I'm curious, like, was it the combination of your dad getting sick and the announcement from the World Health Organization that kind of just made it that, hey, I'm cutting these foods out right away?
Yeah, I think it was just the kind of wake up call. I mean, I believe since my dad has colon cancer, it increases my chances of colon cancer exponentially. So that's number one. So in number two, I was already had sort of these digestive issues. So I thought, oh, why not try this? And I was just really shocked at how great I felt. So I think that you kind of go, it's like you said, I always tell people they need to have a why to begin with. So I think the why for me was health.
Yeah.
And for you, obviously, it was aesthetics. And then you start learning about the environmental implications of animal agriculture. I might have already had seen Cowspiracy at this point, and that really was a kind of eye opening. Wow, I can't believe the food on our plate has such an impact on the world around us. And then additionally, you kind of start putting two and two together, especially as such a passionate animal lover, that, yeah, like for every, I don't know, if I had a plate of chicken wings when I was not vegan, think of how many chickens that
Yeah,
is.
they only have two wings, so that's a lot of
Yeah.
chickens.
Yeah, because if you had like 8 chicken wings, 15 chicken wings, which we would do, you would go out for wing night or whatever,
Yeah.
um, you kind of start putting two and two together, and it's like opening Pandora's box, and then it's quite shocking and horrifying. Um, but that's what made me stay vegan, I think, is
Yeah.
the animal aspect.
So look, 2015, 2016. I like because I think I went vegan like a year or two before you did. What were some of the resources that you looked at when you transition as to like what to eat and kind of how to fuel yourself properly?
Yeah, so the first book I remember reading was Eat to Live by Joel Furman. And then I
Yeah.
really got into Michael Greger and that whole kind of whole food, plant based, SOS, oil free community, which I'm grateful for because I think it set a really great foundation of healthy eating and whole food plant-based cooking that I wouldn't have had if I had entered it just from a purely vegan perspective. So I was
Yeah.
really into reading and that sort of obviously that's evolved since. I mean, my first cookbook was oil free. My second cookbook is mostly oil free, but I now do cook with oil, but I don't eat a lot of processed vegan food. So those were really inspiring to me, and just hearing about how you could essentially, for the most part, health proof yourself from diet related diseases by eating a really, really clean, healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Just as a side note, I think that it's really cool that you were reading Dr. Greger and like looking at his work when you first transitioned because when I met you in Seattle, you followed him on stage.
Oh my
So to
goodness.
be able to share the stage with him when you originally looked at his work, you transition, I think that's super cool.
It is
It's a great journey.
really amazing because my mom and I actually went out and saw him speak, I think around 2018 in Florida.
Yeah.
And I met him, and my mom like snuck him my Plant You business card. And at the
Yeah.
time, I was like no one. I was still working a regular job. And I mean, it's not like I heard from him or anything, but it's so funny now to be like speaking after him. It's
Yeah.
a big trip. And obviously, I mean, honestly, he is the worst person to follow at one of these events because as soon as he gets up to go and take photos with people, everybody gets up and like follows him. So,
Yeah.
so I would rather not, but I will go before him or three speakers after him. He is amazing. And I feel like he's impacted so many lives, and it's inspiring how dedicated for years and years and years he's been to this message. I mean, we think back to 2015, 2016, he was probably going 10 years before that.
Yeah. I think one thing I want to give you credit for, you did have great retention because I remember you telling me that because it was me, you, and Matt, and I think and Tony, and it's like, man, the whole crowd's gonna go to see Gregor to take photos, but you kept a lot of those people
Oh,
when you
thank
went
you.
on stage. So don't sell yourself
It's
short.
it's not my
You had a great crowd.
it's not my first time I followed him. Like, I don't know why they put me after him, but I'm like, oh my goodness, it's so intimidating, especially because he's such a great speaker. Like, I feel like he's so engaging. But thank you. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm very grateful. I don't want to come off as ungrateful. He's incredible, and I could
yeah.
listen to him speak for hours. I think he's a huge draw.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when he started all of this, I don't think he knew that he would become like the vegan rock star of like
Right.
this world, that he would become so popular doing this work 10, 20 years ago. So yeah,
I'm
good for
sure
him for
not.
sticking it out.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
So you went vegan about 2015. Like, did you ever look into like the YouTube world at that time for veganism? Do you remember like Durian Ryder, Freely the Banana Girl, Raw Christina? Did you ever kind of like fall into that world?
I wasn't a big YouTube person, but I definitely came across Rawvana,
Yep.
um, and I believe Freely I knew of. And I think just living in Canada, that a raw lifestyle wasn't as appealing to me because
It's cold.
it is cold. It's like it can get down to like minus 30 degrees Celsius in the wintertime. So the prospect of like eating just bananas and watermelon and whichever else when it's that cold. I find as soon as I don't know if you find this, but you live in California now, but as soon as
Yeah.
the weather switches to warm, my palate completely changes. Like I will start craving salads and juices and stuff like that. Whereas when it's cold out, I all I want is like soup or
Yeah.
pasta.
You don't want to drink smoothies or anything like that.
No,
Yeah.
no. So I think that didn't appeal to me as much.
Yeah. I
Not that
did
there's
it
anything wrong with it. You did a raw vegan lifestyle. How was it? Is that how
in
you
Quebec.
lost all that weight?
No, that was like later on. That was like earlier on. It helped a little bit, but I did raw vegan during winter in Quebec. And so you're in Ontario, so very similar weather during winter.
Oh my
I was
gosh.
freezing. I had three
I
sweaters on. I go out with like
bet.
two coats and beanies and like two pairs of gloves. And yeah, you have to live in a warm weather to be able to do it. You can't do that stuff during winter. So good for you for not doing it because I suffered the whole time. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to live this way forever. I froze my ass for one winter. It wasn't it wasn't that great.
Yeah, I think it is very climate dependent when it comes to the raw stuff.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like, so you basically went whole food plant based because I feel like that's pretty much what was available at the time that you transitioned. So how did you learn to kind of start to make your own recipes? I'm sure that process has evolved from then to now, but back then, like, what was the logic or the methodology to kind of again build your first ebook and to start
Of
fueling
course.
yourself?
I think it started from following other recipes online. So if you put the word vegan in on Pinterest, you'll have like a million different things come up, right? So started following other people's recipes online, and then I would be making my own tweaks. Like I'm constantly adapting stuff. I think that naturally comes from cooking. And then it really came once I sort of learned the basics and was like, oh, now I like tofu. I was scared of it before. Like getting used to kind of those fundamentals that I think you probably need to rely on a vegan diet. I had never eaten beans prior. I was like, these are scary. Like,
How did your gut feel to those?
yeah, I adapted quite well. I think I experienced some bloating for the first couple months, but I was lucky because I do hear that people go from like no fiber to eating a bunch of beans and they really suffer. So you want to soak your
Yeah.
beans. And Dr. Will Balsowitz says like go low and slow, like just add a little bit per day or every other day, and slowly your gut microbiome will adapt to the uptake in fiber, unless you have a
Yeah.
problem like IBS. So I started just playing around, and then it really was about kind of veganizing the food I grew up eating. So I started making things like my mom's bolognese pasta sauce, but shredding a bunch of veggies in the food processor and adding those instead of ground beef. Making tacos out of lentils or shepherd's pie using a bunch of veggies instead of, again, a beef substitute. So that really was the inspiration from my first cookbook, because I thought it would be really great if somebody could have kind of this guidebook that takes them through all these familiar meals that they normally have, like burritos, tacos, cereal, whatever else, and shows them how to do it in a really healthy, whole food, plant-based way.
Did you have any cooking background before you start all of this,
No.
or was it just like you said earlier, chicken, rice, and broccoli, and haha, I'm a chef? Like, how did you
Mhm.
transition from that to veganizing a shepherd's pie or taco?
Yeah, so no cooking background, didn't know how to cook, was always interested in cooking, but never, never. So I always say plant-based eating made me fall in love with cooking, because I think prior to that, I was really intimidated to make things like steak and meat because I was scared that I
Yeah.
was going to get sick, or I was scared I was going to undercook it, or I was scared I was going to overcook it. Now I'm plant-based, and all those kind of barriers that could result in a disaster are lifted, because really when you're making a plant-based meal, if you screw it up you can usually fix it, or you're not going to make yourself sick by eating something that didn't turn out
Yeah.
perfect, right?
Your broccoli will just be a bit more crunchy and your chickpeas too.
Yeah, exactly. So I just started getting really creative in the kitchen. There was certainly a lot of imposter syndrome. I started posting, I was really honest about it on Instagram, so I started posting like my journey, and it
Yeah.
mostly started by kind of documenting what I was eating out, and then slowly sharing, like, oh, I made this wrap today and I put this in it. I wasn't trying to come off like I knew what I was doing. But then I got contacted by a literary agent and signed a cookbook deal, because I was like, how can I say no to this opportunity? And I was like, oh my gosh, nobody knows that I have no idea what I'm doing. So the first cookbook was really a crash course in learning how to cook, because I tested like recipes every day, all day for like a year and a half. And additionally, a crash course in photography, because the day I signed my cookbook deal, I went to a photography store and bought a camera and lighting, and just bought whatever they told me to buy using my small cookbook advance, and shot the cookbook myself as well. So
Nice.
to answer your question, no prior cooking experience. However, I now reflect and think in some ways that benefited me and continues to benefit me, because I think that the meals I make, I like to tell people, are for regular people, from a regular person for regular people. It's nothing fancy. It's very easy. If I can cook it 9 times out of 10 or 9.9 times out of 10, you can too. So I like to try and shift my perspective and look at it as a superpower rather than get really anxiety ridden about the fact that I'm not a actual chef.
Yeah. Hey, you've done some amazing recipes. Ivy and I have tried a bunch of them, and
Thank you.
yeah, we've played around with it. So I'm curious. We spoke about your husband when we were in New York, about his journey with kind of like plant-based eating. So was he like your taste tester basically as you're
Oh,
kind of going through
absolutely.
all these experimentations?
Yeah. So my husband and I, we've been together for almost 13 years now. So a long time. I met him when I was 19. And when we met, we were big animal product eaters, and we were both huge foodies. So it was a huge shock to him when I told him I'm going vegan. And he was supportive, but he was like, what the heck are we going to do? Because I'm not going vegan. Like, what am I going to do at dinner time? And I'm like, okay, well, what I always suggest to people is making base recipes and then allowing the person, or if you're comfortable cooking the meat as a side dish, this is a healthy way to approach a diet anyways, rather than making meat like the center of your meal. So a good
Yeah.
example of this, like we would start by, I would make like a curry dish and then he would make shrimp to have on the top. And then I would just eat the veggie curry. So that worked for like 6 months. And then he went mostly plant based. So mostly plant based is our home went entirely vegan. And then he still continues to eat animal products if he's out and about, like if he goes to dinner with his friends at work. But he loves eating plant based and has competed in, I want to say 5, 6 Ironmans, half Ironmans since doing that, and has seen a lot of athletic benefits from eating a almost entirely plant-based lifestyle. But he has been the taste tester for all of my cookbooks. So
Okay.
he has seen all the failures, all the good stuff. And there's one recipe in particular for my first cookbook that he will not allow me to make because I tested it so many times, and that was vegan meatloaf. I don't know if you've ever tried to make a vegan meatloaf, but the texture was killing me. Like
Yeah.
every night when he would come home from work, I have another rendition of this like chickpea based meatloaf, and it would be mushy, fall apart, or
Yeah.
oh, something wrong. I eventually nailed it, but like he cannot eat it to this day.
He's got PTSD from vegan meatloaf,
PTSD
basically.
from the vegan meatloaf.
That's funny. So I'm curious, like, as you said, after 6 months, you kind of just start eating more plant-based at the house. Was it out of laziness that he didn't want to cook his part of the meal to add it on top? Because I feel like that's what it would be for me.
Yeah, I think it was a combination. I think the big thing is like you see that tofu tastes delicious, beans taste
Yeah.
delicious. These meals don't need the shrimp on top or the meat. And it was like, why am I doing this? Or like, is it benefiting me? So I think, and then a combination, like obviously I was cooking all of the food. So he eventually just decided to eat what I was eating, which I think, thank goodness for that. And that was probably back in 2016, 2017. So it's been several years. And that's
Yeah.
worked really well for us. I mean, I've pushed him, pushed him, but it's better in my experience to lead by example and not lecture or force anybody to do anything. And he's come a long way from when I met him. So I'm
Yeah.
super grateful.
Yeah. It makes the world of a difference. Because that's the situation, right? It's hard if, especially like both of you started off not vegan, right? And
Yeah,
then you kind of got
exactly.
into it. Like Ivy and I was already vegan. Like I was Mr. Fit Vegan for several
Yeah.
years before I met her. So she kind of joined in. But yeah, it's a lot of people struggle with that transition of like one partner will go whole food plant based. And it's like, how do I educate them? And I feel like what you did is the best is you cooking delicious food, let them add what they want. And men are lazy ultimately at the end of the day. So they'll just be tired of cooking their own part to add to the meal. And then they'll just be like, oh, Carleigh didn't faint from protein deficiency. She's fine. Then I'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think once you see how delicious plant-based food is, that makes it easy, right? Did Ivy
Yeah.
transition really quickly when you guys started dating?
No, it took her like a year to a year and a half. She was still eating fish. So I
Right.
bought her a pan for her to cook her fish. Like she couldn't cook her fish in my pan
I
because I didn't
totally
want,
get that. Yeah,
yeah,
I
it's like,
totally
don't
get
touch my
that.
pan with your nasty fish. But then I got out the house when she was cooking it because I just couldn't stand the smell.
Oh my
And
goodness, I
eventually,
so relate.
right. And eventually she saw, I was like, well, I'm thriving. We have a bunch of clients that are thriving. She met more people. And she obviously she found your page, other people's page, and she's like, well, I feel like I could do this. And then she hasn't looked back in over a year now.
That's amazing. So
Yeah.
awesome. And it's, I think for a lot of people, they look at it in such a black and white way, like, oh, my partner has to be vegan, whichever else, which is fine. I understand that in some ways, but in another sense, like look at the example that you're providing. Like you had patience and your partner eventually did go vegan. I had patience and my partner is now eating vegan entirely at home. So
And even if they don't, like just even, your husband eating 90%, 95% plant based, like that's a world of a difference on his health. and you're
Oh,
helping him protect
exactly.
for the future. So it's better than, schooling someone for not being vegan, then they just want to go the opposite direction, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So love to ask you about your kind of like the I think the big book that kind of where you got known more in the public, your Plant You book, right? The one before this one. So how was it preparing for that? Because once you launch, like you did a good job. You were
Oh, thank you.
everywhere. You were everywhere.
Thank you. Yeah, it was amazing. I had spent a couple of years or a few years or whenever I started on Instagram building really positive relationships with a lot of people in the plant-based community, and
Yeah.
really these idols like Rip Esselstyn, Chef AJ, people that I looked up to prior to even starting my own page. And when my book came out, because it was whole food, plant based, and oil free, and really fit into that kind of lifestyle, these people just supported me in an enormous way and did for my second book as well. And that's really what propelled its success. And I'm just so grateful. But it's kind of like this tsunami effect. Like I did all this kind of contact work where I was asking people to come on their podcasts, asking people to come on their pages and shows, and then it all sort of erupted during the launch week of the book. And then the book sold out. It sold out from retailers across the US and Canada, which you would think is a great thing, but was a really horrifying thing because at this point, the book was selling so well that we had a chance to make the New York Times bestsellers list, which obviously is an author's dream. And I'm
Yeah.
like, we're not going to make it because the book has sold out from retailers and my publisher hadn't ordered. It was not their fault because I kind of blew up after they had placed their order for the books.
Yeah.
So it was like a bit of a messy situation. And then additionally to that, there was all of these issues shipping the books. So it was going to be 2 months before a new order came through, which is
Yeah.
not typical, but it was the time COVID was still happening. So the book sold out completely 3 days after it launched and wasn't in stock for 2 months. And I still made the New York Times bestsellers list, which was crazy. I was like
Nice.
elated. And then it came back in stock 2 months later. I was really, really worried that because we had had this kind of like hard stop with the book selling out, that it would lose momentum. But thankfully, people bought it when it came back in stock. And it's been great. Like I feel like people make my recipes from my website, yes, but there is something about the book where people make the recipes so often and they're like making every recipe from the book. They're like folding pages, getting it messy, sending me photos, and it's just the best thing ever. And it's the two books, probably more the second now, are the things I'm most proud of that I've done because I think they have the ability, when you get a book in your hand and you can cook from it, has the ability to really impact people's lives, or from a health perspective or from a going vegan perspective. So it's pretty
Yeah.
cool. It's pretty cool. You should write a book. It's like
Yeah.
nothing else.
Well, we talked about it in New York. Yeah, next year on the list. Now that you're right, there is something to holding a physical book versus kind of being online and looking at recipe. I'm a book nerd. I have so many books. There's just this the feel, the smell of a book, and yeah, I just love it. It makes the experience so much better.
Yeah, and I think there's something about not reading a recipe from your phone. I always say
Yeah.
cooking is like a lost art. And I think it's one of the only times for me where I'm really like mindful. You're off your phone, you're making food, you're nourishing your body, you're cooking for you or your family. And it can be this amazing experience. But when you're holding a phone up, that's it's kind of takes away from it. So that's another thing that makes cookbooks particularly special.
Yeah, it's all going back to like I saying that digital detox, not being on the phone, having a
Hmm.
notebook to write notes versus your phone, of like a physical cookbook, just allows you to be present and kind of enjoy the experience of preparing the food with your family. And there's something to it versus being distracted while you're cooking.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, there's a recipe. I was listening to your interview with Chuck that you did.
Oh, I love Chuck.
Yeah, Chuck is awesome. I actually was just with him in Cleveland for the
Oh,
National Health
cool.
Association conference, and before I went to New York, ultimately, Ivy and I did an episode together on like fit vegan couples and like how to help each other transition. So that's gonna be coming out. That's cool. Um, you talked about bacon, about like how to make vegan bacon, but you said one thing was rice paper bacon. And
Yes,
so do
it's
you
so
mind kind of
good.
sharing that and
Of
how you came
course.
up with that?
Of
Because
course.
you have to, I feel like I'd have to sit down for like an hour to be like, how can I make bacon out of the things that I have in my house? So how did you come up with it and how do you make it?
Rice paper bacon. So originally came up with it because I was playing a lot with rice paper for a recipe in my first book, which is cauliflower wings.
Yeah.
And I think I saw somebody else wrap cauliflower in daikon radish.
Okay.
And I thought, that's interesting. I wonder what is similar to radish. Okay, rice paper is kind of pliable like that. Let's try it. And the wings turned out amazing. So then it was like, okay, what else can I do with rice paper? And then I was like, okay, bacon, because it kind of has that texture that is like I said, pliable but can be kind of crispy. So then to make rice paper bacon, it's delicious. The recipe's on my website, but you basically soak rice paper in a delicious soy sauce. You can add liquid smoke, paprika, garlic marinade. Then you layer two things of rice paper. You can put flaky salt in between if you want something like very decadent. And then you just pop in the oven for probably like 5 to 6 minutes. It's quick. Or you can air fry, even better. And if you want to spray with oil, you don't have to. It will make like a crispy bacon. And then it's great even on a BLT. So
Mm.
delicious. And it looks very bacon like.
And it's fairly low in calories too, because
Yeah,
rice
because it's
paper
rice
isn't that high.
paper. It's rice paper, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I will have to. I'll give that to Ivy because I've honestly Ivy's been looking at some of your recipes, and she kind of got the same energy as you when she got started. She's like, "Oh, I'm plant based now. What do I eat?" And she got on a cooking kick, and
Yeah.
then she made me buy everything. So we have a juicer, an air fryer, a dehydrator, a Vitamix. We just bought everything. So now she has her tools to kind of try a
Amazing.
bunch of recipes. Um, I'm curious, what are some of the go-to meals that you guys eat in your household on on a weekly basis? Like, what are you guys' top meals?
Nothing fancy. So what I like to tell people is I think they look at pages like mine and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this girl's cooking every day and it's something different every day." And it's like, I'm a food blogger. This is my full-time job. But still, I find we're rotating through the same staple meals almost every week. So we will make some sort of pasta sauce, and it's like a bolognese pasta. And I actually have it on the stove right now. And what I do is I will take any veggie I have in my fridge. So today we use zucchini, bell pepper, onion, garlic. Want to think of anything else, even carrot. I add it to a food processor and pulse it until it's like a veggie ground. And then I add it to a pan with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil, soy sauce, balsamic vinegar, nutritional yeast, and tomato paste. And I'll saute that until it's like a veggie ground. And usually I will also add a pack of extra firm tofu to the food processor as well. So it becomes ground. Add that to the pan, and you have like a meat, and then I'll just add like a store-bought pasta sauce, or you can even add a can of crushed tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I have a recipe for this in my new cookbook, PlantYou's Scrappy Cooking, and I have a rendition of it in my first cookbook, but the one in the second cookbook is better. And I probably have one online. I make this all the time. So maybe once a week, or we'll make like a pesto pasta, similar kind of vibe, like in a food processor or blender. You'll take like soaked cashews, basil, any greens. You could do radish greens, beet greens if we're talking scrappy, and nutritional yeast, garlic, blend it up. You've got a green pasta sauce. Other meals I make a curry usually every week, so it just depends on what we're feeling. But my favorite is red curry. Make tofu with it, or you can add chickpeas and whatever veggies we have in the fridge. And then I'll usually make a stir fry, so like a veggie broth, soy sauce, teriyaki stir fry, and same sort of thing. Use whatever veggies. Use tempeh, white beans over rice. So the thing about these recipes is I tell people when they're learning how to cook plant-based is that you want to get comfortable with like a base sauce, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you can just basically add whatever you have in your fridge. And the big thing about this is there's this huge study by the American Gut Health Project that talked about how eating 30 diverse plants per week or more really improves the health of your gut microbiome, which we now know impacts all of our bodily
Everything.
health. And to do this is actually quite easy because plants include whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, spices, maybe, and vegetables. But to do this, it doesn't mean you have to be cooking a new recipe every night. It's really just about looking at, okay, I'm making a peanut butter curry tonight. I've got this, and this vegetable. Will it go in it? And probably 9 times out of 10 it will. So that was a very long-winded answer
No,
to
it's
your
perfect.
question.
That's the thing, right? People see all these amazing recipes online. They're like, man, Carly's eating like a chef every night. She's eating all this just food. But the reality of being in the vegan food and health industry is like, yeah, we're basic somewhat with our meals. Like you don't have time to cook like that
Exactly.
every single meal.
Exactly. And if somebody was to peruse my page, they'll probably see that a lot of the meals are like similar versions of themselves
Yeah,
because I want it to be reflective mostly of what I'm eating and really easy. But yeah, we cycle through a lot of the same meals. How about you guys? Do you find you have like your basics that you make most weeks?
for sure. Like a smoothie, it's a protein smoothie every day. There is a Buddha bowl or a stir fry, which let's be
Hmm.
honest, a stir fry is just a cooked Buddha bowl. It's like literally the
Exactly.
same ingredients. And then usually it'll be like a vegan bodybuilder meal, which will be like a rice with tofu or tempeh with some vegetables. And I love ketchup. No matter, how low I am in my cut, I always have ketchup on there.
You'll put
So
ketchup on like a rice bowl?
yeah, I just love
Oh my
ketchup.
gosh.
Yeah, like ketchup, like brown rice, tofu, and like broccolini is what we had yesterday, and some chickpeas, and I'll put a little bit of ketchup on top of it.
Wow.
Yeah,
See,
I'm
I'm not that
basic.
big of a ketchup on French fries. I don't know if it goes beyond that for me, but good for you.
Yeah, I'm basic with my stuff. So
That's
those,
good though. That's healthy. That's really healthy. I'm too obsessed with sauce, and I
yeah,
feel like I should draw back a bit. But
but that's what makes a
life's short.
difference, right? In a dish, like
No, makes a huge difference calorically.
yeah, well, a little bit, but there is low calorie sauces, but I feel like for people that are transitioning, a lot of it is like boredom. They couldn't eat the way that I'm eating every day because it's so plain. But if you add a good sauce to those dishes, like it just changes the game. You're like, oh, I could
Right,
eat this
right.
every day, or I can change the sauce every 4 days, and I'd be completely happy with it.
Yeah, because if you take something like a tofu bowl that you're talking about and you make like barbecue tofu, that's a complete, and maybe you have the veg be asparagus instead of broccolini, that's a
Yeah.
completely different vibe than what you're talking about with the ketchup, right? So little tweaks make a huge difference.
Yeah, and it makes it so easy to change your vegetables because if you buy broccolini and you run out, then you go to a grocery store, then you buy asparagus or you buy
Exactly.
Brussels sprouts and you kind of vary it that way. So 30 a week is pretty doable, even
I
if you're
feel like
boring with your
you can
meals. Yeah.
almost do it in a meal. Like
Yeah.
it's 30 a week is so 30 a day is so attainable. I mean, there is the financial barrier here, but I think if you're going to count spices and you're going to make things like smoothies using frozen fruit, which is just fabulous anyways,
Yeah.
it's pretty attainable.
Yeah. Oh, that's what we do. We do frozen fruits. Fresh fruits, like if you eat a smoothie a day, they go bad, right?
Oh,
Um,
100%.
but we want to try. We actually have some strawberries and blueberries and blackberries that are gone, not necessarily bad, but they're not the best because we went to New York for a week. So we're gonna see if we can make your fruit leather
Oh, it's so good.
recipe.
I'm trying a watermelon version tomorrow. I'll
Oh,
keep you
nice,
posted. Might be a little more
nice.
difficult because of the water content, but yeah, fruit leather is so fun.
We have a watermelon in the fridge. You let me know how it
Ooh,
goes, and then we
I'll
can
let you
try it
know.
because it's
I'll be
chia
the
seed and maple syrup, right?
tester. Yeah, you don't even need the maple syrup. Well, the berries, I feel like watermelon is quite sweet, so I don't think
Yeah,
I'm going to add maple syrup to it, but the berries can be tart.
yeah.
So you can add a little bit of maple syrup and chia seeds. You don't even need the maple
That's very
syrup or the
Canadian
chia
of you.
seeds. Yes, I know. I use maple syrup in every recipe that I have sweetness in,
Yeah,
and I don't realize that the rest of the world that maple syrup is like not the most accessible ingredient because there's so much maple syrup here. But
yeah. Well, they use like Aunt Jemima. They use like all
yeah,
the fake crap. syrup here in the
Not the
States.
Canadian maple syrup.
Yeah, yeah, you just go grab it in your backyard.
Not quite. But
Have you ever like made
no,
maple
I'd love
syrup
to
and picked it
tap.
up?
So I wanted to do a video this year and I contacted like a local maple syrup farm, but they never got back to me. But I am hoping I was very late and I
Yeah.
want to do a video next year because I've never tapped it. Have you? I guess in
Yeah.
Quebec, I
Yeah, well,
would think.
I lived in Bristol, which was
Okay.
like an hour like on the Quebec side away from Ottawa. So I lived in the woods. Like I grew up on 140 acres of
Oh,
like land.
wow.
We were farming, we are doing all that stuff. So I had a friend, he had those old Bombardier Skidoos,
Mm-hmm.
like the old ones you can fit like
Mm-hmm.
12 people inside of it that's made out of wood. And we drive in the forest and then yeah, we tap the trees, grab the water, and then he'd have the whole facility to make it into maple syrup. And so that same night we were able to like put the maple syrup on snow. You put your little stick and you eat
That's
it.
so freaking cool.
So good, so sweet but
Yeah.
so good.
I want to do it this year. I really, really want to do it because it's like I use it so often in my recipes. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
yeah, definitely. I'm excited to see that video because it is a fun process. Like you
And
earned
then
it,
I
you
love
froze your
the,
fingers.
yeah, I love the people putting it on the snow and you put it like a popsicle stick, right? And make like
Yeah,
a
I don't know what
delicious
it's
treat.
called in English, but in French it's la tire sur la neige. So you
Mm,
just yeah, you boil it, you put it on the snow, and it kind of becomes thicker, and then you put
hmm.
like a popsicle stick and you roll it, and it's like a really thick, dense maple syrup stick.
Cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
need to do
so
it.
good. Probably the most Canadian thing you can do just to go do that. Um, so I question before we move over to your Scrappy cookbook because I want to talk about some stats about
Yeah, of
food
course,
waste
food
and all
waste.
that. First question I want to ask before we get there is why are your recipes whole food, plant based, and oil free, or primarily oil free? Because a lot of cookbooks that are coming out now, people are using a lot of fake meats and a lot of
Hmm.
fake vegan products for their recipes.
Yes. So the big reason that they're whole food plant based is just evidence based that a whole food plant based lifestyle is one of the greatest things you can do for your longevity. And I mean, I think that plant based meats have their place in time. I'm certainly will have a Beyond Burger at a barbecue if that's the only option. But to eat every day, I personally don't want to be eating a lot of processed food. And these are processed items. And then on top of that is they're expensive.
Yeah,
And then the third thing is like if I'm going to buy a cookbook and it's like US based and they're telling me to get this brand of like vegan ground beef, I feel like that's not the easiest thing to find, but you can almost always find a can of beans.
yeah,
So, mostly for health. My philosophy on oil has shifted over the years. It's not that I think oil free isn't great. I do. But the main kind of argument for going oil free when I wrote my first cookbook seemed to be that it could impair cardiac function. And there's
yeah,
been a lot of doctors since who have talked about that olive oil actually improves your cardiac outcomes. And oftentimes, I heard from Simon Hill that people will, if they go oil free, sometimes avoid eating more vegetables because they're not as palatable. And I
yeah,
found myself doing this. Like, I would avoid having salad because I didn't want to make like some really crazy salad dressing without oil, or I didn't really want to just have like lemon juice or balsamic vinegar on the salad. And then I
yeah,
found myself I don't want to get into this whole thing, but I would find myself kind of using nut butters in place of oil. So I would be
yeah.
using like a heavy nut butter in baking when I could have just used a tablespoon of olive oil. And if you compare those two things from a macro
Same.
perspective, it's going to be the same caloric density.
Yeah,
So it started becoming a bit nonsensical to me for my own lifestyle. And I wasn't at the time and now having issues with weight, which
yeah,
is where I think eating an oil free lifestyle and potentially diabetes um, is really beneficial because could be beneficial because we know that a tablespoon of oil is 100 calories is the most calorically dense food that you can eat. So if you're
Yeah.
using a lot of that, to eliminate that, it's not really going to change the volume of the food you're eating and for the most part the taste, but you've now cut out so many calories. So
Yeah.
my perspective on oil, I now use olive oil. However, I kept the second cookbook mostly oil free because the oil free community supported me so much and I wanted them to be able to use the book. So I think
Yeah.
almost all recipes are oil free optional and you can use oil or you don't have to. But mostly that just starts with like cooking, like if like we said a pasta, if you're cooking a pasta, you start with vegetable broth instead of oil in the pan. So it can be really simple. What is your
Yeah.
take on the whole oil debate?
Yeah, no, I'm the same boat as you. So like Ivy and I will use some oil from time to time. Like we won't use it in every meal just because of that aspect of calorie density, right? Like right now I'm doing a little body recomp phase. Ivy, as I say, this is getting older, but people don't know her age. But getting older, so she's being more cautious of kind of how she's eating. Um, and let's be honest, no one ever uses 1 tablespoon of oil when they're
No, you
cooking. Like,
pour it in the pan.
yeah, which is more like three or maybe
Mm-hmm.
three, which is like 300 calories. That's like that could be a
Mm-hmm.
full meal right there. So
I'd rather have a cookie.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
what I would always
Exactly.
say.
So we have an air fryer, which does an
Yeah.
amazing job. But from time to time, we'll kind of use it. Or if we go to a restaurant, we'll just be more cautious of it. I think the oil free movement, from the health aspect, there's debates on that. But for a lot of people, it's from a weight loss standpoint. But if you're monitoring your calorie intake and you make it fit within your calories, then it's not the end of the world, right? You're still in a good
Yeah.
position. You're aware of all of it. So I'm on the same boat as you. I think there's a big debate on on the oil, but
It's
it's great that
always,
you made it.
yeah.
It's great that you made it an option because I feel like the whole food plant-based oil-free movement is such a niche community, and there's the rest of the world who is like not ready to go that niche with their nutrition, and they're still eating meat, but like I want to eat plant-based because my cholesterol is high, my blood pressure is high, and I'm not going to cut oil, but I just want to eat more plants. So it just makes it more accessible for everyone. So I think it's great that you did that.
Yeah, and I want these people to like go from eating meat and cheese, which are like calorically dense foods, to enjoying the plant-based food, right? So I think it's a big jump to expect people to go from like eating the standard American diet to eating whole food plant-based, salt, oil free.
Yeah, and
But
sugar free.
and
SOS.
sugar
Yeah.
free. But we can get them, I think we can get them eating whole food plant-based relatively. I think the food is amazing. So that's kind
Yeah.
of been my philosophy and shift over the last couple of years as I've gotten more comfortable and um, kind of changed my viewpoint on some things.
Yeah, no, for sure. Once you choose to go plant based, it opens up so many different sectors, right? You
Hmm.
can be whole food plant based, you can be SOS, you can be raw vegan, you can be a hardcore vegan, you can, be raw till four, like you can do keto vegan. Like there's so many components of it. So whatever makes it easier for more people to eat more plant-based and reduce their risk of cancer, reduce their risk of heart disease. Like, hey, you're gonna eat 95% plant-based and you're gonna use some oil, shit, go for it. Because that's better than you eating a steak every night and some, a bunch of
100%.
eggs for breakfast.
100%.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about your latest book, Scrappy
Yeah.
Cooking, which I
Yeah.
feel like you've built a new niche, a new term that people will use for years to come.
Oh,
What was
thank
the
you.
inspiration to build this specific cookbook?
Yeah, so after I had published Plant You, which was my first book, I heard a statistic that was super shocking to me, and that was that 30 to 40% of all food in North America ends up in landfills. And I thought, whoa, I am probably contributing to that as a food blogger who's buying, testing recipes all week. And my mind sort of went to, okay, that decomposes, it's no big deal. But unfortunately, when food ends up in landfills, what happens is it gets buried by all different like plastics and other waste. And
Sure.
as it decomposes, it emits a really powerful greenhouse gas called methane. And to put this into perspective, food waste produces more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire airline industry. It's a really big problem
Wow.
for our environment. But on top of that, you living in California and being from Canada will relate to this. Grocery prices are just so expensive.
Yeah.
So if we as consumers, which consumers are the biggest, if we're looking at a pie chart, there's restaurants, there's grocery stores, there's consumers, there's farms. Um, Consumers are the largest chunk. So they're the largest percentage, which is shocking to people, but it's because we don't have a bottom line. Like a grocery store is really being very careful about what the food that they're selling. And we're kind of buying, we're so busy, and then we waste a lot of food. And
Yeah.
I mean, we can't afford to be wasting a lot of food. It's, if you think about inflation and our grocery prices going up, we can really cut that if we're just more mindful about the food that we're eating. So I started a little series called Scrappy Cooking. I threw up an orange peel candy recipe one day and I didn't think much of it, but I came back to my phone after posting it and it was going crazy viral. And it was kind of erupting this conversation about food waste that I felt like people weren't talking about enough. And kind of immediately at this light bulb moment that this could be a really good concept for a cookbook to help people not only eat healthier, but reduce their waste on top of that. So that was the inspo for Scrappy Cooking.
What was what was your thought process behind seeing a leftover? Would you find a leftover ingredient and then build a recipe around it, or would you have a recipe and then kind of see what you can make fit inside of it with leftovers?
So you're first. So once I started recipe testing for Scrappy, it was more about like I would bring home radishes because I wanted to make a salad and be like, wait, I normally discard these tops. What can we do with them? So really thinking about how to use up these foods that we so often waste and whether they're edible or not, kind of the research portion of that. So it was really fun. But additionally, I wanted the recipes in the book to be really practical. So kind of to our earlier conversation, the majority of the recipes in the book are foundational recipes that people can use up the veggies or the protein sources that they have in their fridge. So we have like, they're called kitchen raid recipes, and they're kind of like a curry recipe where you can use any can of beans or any vegetable. And really, because to our point, this is how I cook. And I'm like, if I can teach people to make these base recipes that can be really healthy and really easy, then I think that they can be empowered to kind of make substitutions, which is the key to reducing waste. Because if we can
Yeah.
kind of look at that box of spinach in the back of our fridge and know that, oh, Carleigh has a pesto recipe that uses any green, I can just use that. That was the goal. So we've got a ton of scrappy stuff like coffee ground granola and all sorts of like crazy things. But of the over, I think there's probably like 200 recipes. It's crazy. They're mostly practical things.
So you mentioned top of radishes. What do you do with those?
Yeah, radish tops, beet tops are things like we so often discard, and it doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense because they're delicious. So you can chop them up, put them in the salad. You can make a pesto with them, or you can even bake them up with some nutritional yeast and apple cider vinegar and make beet top or radish top chips.
Okay.
Delicious. Another huge one that I see people throw out all the time, and they're often paying for by weight, are broccoli stems. So this makes no sense because the broccoli stems are delicious. So you can grate them, make them into a slaw. You can peel them and make matchsticks. So I love to put them into summer rolls with rice paper. Or
Okay.
again, you can blend them. I have a great green goddess soup in the book where it uses the stalk and some florets from broccoli. It's fun.
What about, that bottom part of the asparagus that you always cut out?
Yes.
I always cut too much off of it. Can you do something with that?
Yeah, woody asparagus ends, you can make a dip. So I've got this like great edamame. Have you ever been to Farm Boy in Canada?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they have this spicy kale edamame dip there. It is so good. And I wanted to try and remake it, but I threw in the woody ends of asparagus one day because I had it. I was making asparagus and it turned out delicious. It had like a subtle asparagus flavor. So I have that dip in the book and I've also posted it to my feed, I think. But they can, if you blend them up, they're perfectly edible and delicious.
Oh, that's crazy. And then so the leftover like kale and spinach that's a little bit
Yeah.
spoiled, like
Yeah,
it's getting not looking so
yeah, it's
great.
getting there. It's getting there.
Then you can make a sauce with it. I think you said a
Yeah,
pesto.
yeah, it's a spread. So you can use it as like a high protein spread, or you could even use it as a pasta sauce, add some pasta water and mix it up like a green sauce.
Oh, damn. Because Ivy and I travel a lot, and every time we come back, the stuff in our fridge is just like done. And we're just like, oh, we got to
Yeah,
throw
that's
it
what
out.
happens, right?
Yeah. And it's a full grocery run. You're just like, oh, shit, that's all wasted now.
I always tell people the low hanging fruit, pardon the pun, to reducing food waste is really planning. So it's not necessarily about like using your banana peels to make bacon, which is so fun and
Wait,
great.
you can do that?
Yes, you can do that. Same marinade we talked about earlier, and then you bake or air fry them. Um,
Wait, you can
but
eat the
if
peel?
yeah, you can eat the peel. Totally
Damn.
good. And it's crazy. It's very bacon like, but if you're not like if you're apprehensive to eat the peel, you can also soak the peels in water if you want to get like more use out of them and make a plant fertilizer. But be careful what plants you put it on because I think some because it's high in phosphorus, so some are good, some won't like it. Same with coffee grounds. I am
Yeah.
not agreeing with them, but I know you can do it. But these are conversation starters. But the low hanging fruit is planning. So I always tell people sit down, whatever day of the week you and your spouse have off, sit down for like 20 minutes, get a piece of paper. You don't need anything fancy for this, and write down like Monday to Friday, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Try to think about what you want to eat for the week. And it could be like, okay, we're going to have green pasta for dinner on Monday. I'm going to take the leftovers for lunch on Tuesday. I'm going to make overnight oats. Then make a grocery list and shop your fridge and pantry. Even better is if you started at your fridge and pantry to kind of make these recipes, but to my point, shop your fridge and pantry, see what you already have, and then you make a grocery list and head to the grocery store. And this will cut your grocery bill. You'll eat healthier because you actually have a plan for the food that you're buying, which is probably really healthy. And it's like a win-win-win. And then you're going to reduce your food waste by a massive amount. And it's quite easy. It's quite easy. You just need a piece of paper. You don't need anything fancy to do that.
Yeah, that's such a good idea because Ivy and I, we go to a grocery store and it's like, do we have this at the house? And then they were like, I don't know. And let's just buy it just in case. And then you just have so much stuff in your house that just adds up. And I hate sitting on so much food because I'm like,
Yeah,
we
like
need to use this up at one point.
10 bags of Bob's Red Mill oats. Like we would buy oats every time we went to the grocery store before putting
Yeah.
this into place because you're like, do I have them?
A lot of
Um,
rice and
yeah.
oatmeal and yeah, chia seeds,
Worse when it's
pancake
fresh
mix.
food. Yeah, worse when it's fresh food because then it's going to and then your freezer is like your best friend, right? Like you can freeze so many things and then repurpose it and that can really avoid a lot of waste as well.
Yeah. Well, I'll be honest, you blew my mind with the banana thing because we eat like 20 to 30 bananas a week in our
Yeah.
house with like smoothies and snacks. I got bacon for days.
you
Um,
got you got a ton of bacon.
I'm gonna have to try that out because I wonder what the macros are on a banana peel.
It would
Probably
be
just
low calorie. It would definitely be low calorie. I mean, I have them in my book. I have the macros at the back, so you can take a look. There's we also provide a mushroom option because I'm like, I don't think any I don't think most people are going to be down with this, but in case there are a few, we've got it in there.
hey, I'll try it. I'll let you know. I'll let you know how I mean I find it. Um, so we'd love to ask you. Obviously, for the people listening, I will have mentioned this in the intro of the podcast. I'm buying 10 books from your latest book, Scrappy Cooking, and giving it away online. So 5 of them, I'm giving them away on Instagram. So once
Cool.
this podcast goes live, we'll make the giveaway there, and then the other 5, I'm going to do a giveaway inside of our Fit Vegan coaching program for our
Cool.
clients. I know a lot of them already have your book, but I'm sure they want to get a copy for maybe for their friends or something like that. So, where can people find more information about the book, the work that you're doing, a lot of your delicious recipes?
Yeah, everything is at PlantYou, so PlantYou. I'm on just about every social platform, and my website's plantyou.com, and you can find the book all of those places.
Beautiful. So I have to ask you a few more questions because I just it just came up in my head. Did you start your Instagram handle as Plant You way back then when you started?
Yeah, so interestingly, I went on GoDaddy.com and I own so many domains. Like I'm constantly
Hey,
buying domains.
me
But
too.
I was combining things with the word plant, and I wish this was a better story, but Plant You was one of them that wasn't taken, and it was like 11.99 or something. I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, wow, this is a good domain." And then I hopped over to Instagram and it was available. And so then the rest was history. And and we got on, but it's crazy because I feel like I can't believe that was available.
Yeah, it's short, it's easy to remember. Did you know that you wanted to like go down this path when you first started posting?
Oh gosh, no. I was working now. I probably started when it was at the radio station, and then I was working in marketing for a hospital charity. So like I
Okay.
did not think much of it. I just like was kind of into business and into vlogging about what I was doing and sharing about it. And I took a health coaching program for 2 years actually. So I'm technically a holistic nutrition coach or a holistic nutritionist, but I don't work in that space. And so I thought maybe it could come in handy, and it started kind of gaining momentum. And it wasn't until really 2019 where the account had grown to 100,000. And now at this time, I had launched a meal plan program where it was like releasing weekly meal plans that
Yeah.
it became viable. I was like, oh, this could be a business.
Yeah. Well, good on you for getting the domain from the start because and
Yeah, it
I
would have been a pain later, or it would have just been something different, right? Like I would have never,
gotten it.
yeah.
Yeah. I I didn't buy mine and the guy wants 50K for it.
No.
Yeah, so I'm like, yeah, we're just not
What
gonna
is
buy
that?
it, right?
Fitvegan.com?
Yeah, fitvegan.com. So I
Mm.
have fitvegan.ca, I have fitvegancoaching.com, but fitvegan.com, the guy wants like a ton of
Do you
money
have it
for it.
trademarked?
I can't trademark fit vegan because it's like trademarking water. That's kind of the
Right.
response I got from the lawyers.
Because it's
It's
like,
too
yeah.
general. Yeah. So we're looking into a few different trademarks, which I won't share on the recording because I don't want anyone to get it. But well, I'm looking into a few of them. Hey, it is part of the business, right? But good on you for getting the domain from the start. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
lucked out. It was a
Yeah.
long time ago, so I lucked out in that way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Carleigh, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm happy we're able to make the recording happen. Everyone, even if you don't win a copy of the book, go buy a copy of the book. And if you already have one, buy another one and then give it to a friend because I
Oh,
think
you're so sweet.
the best way to help people transition to eating more plant-based is making eating plant-based easy. And I think you did a really good job at simplifying and kind of having simple recipes for people to be able to follow, but for it to also be delicious. Because if they eat vegan food and they don't like it, they won't eat it again. So I think you did a good job
Exactly.
combining everything.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. This was a blast.
Yeah. And everyone, thank you very much for listening. I will put all the links down below in the description, whether you're on YouTube or listening on audio. So you can get a copy of the book. Again, you probably already follow Carleigh. But if you don't, you should go and check her out down below. And we will see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.